Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner University podcast. I'm your host, Paul O'Neid, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with my bodybuilding coach, a gentleman who coached me to my first show, Luke Miller. Luke is an educator with J3 University, and he's the owner of No Switch Fitness. Luke you were on the podcast with me and Tony, weren't you?
Yeah, it was a while back, but
A
yeah, I
long
did
time
get
ago.
the chance to come on. So always happy to come on for a friend, man. Always
Yeah, no,
happy.
I really appreciate the time because, as we're going to get into it, you've been up to a lot of stuff and time is very, very valuable. So, yeah, what's been new and exciting with you?
Yeah, life's been wild this year. It's been a transformative year for me in regards to just like the 10-year vision.
Mhm.
Um, so that's been pretty cool to kind of go through in regards to just like my role at J3 University, taking a much larger uh, step in the direction that I wanted to go. And then just kind of the future of the coaching businesses for me, which I'm sure we'll dive into in a bit, just kind of where that's headed.
Yeah.
And just like what I want to do with my role of like educating coaches and everything like that is it's not fully built out for everybody to see yet. So I mean, we'll get into it, kind of start to
Yeah.
peek the curtain a bit, but yeah, it's been huge. I'm really excited. It's been a good coaching year as well. So a lot of development for not only myself but the people working under me, and it's been pretty awesome.
So let's speak a little bit to your coaching resume. Like what are some of the highlights of the coaching resume up to this point?
Yeah, so I mean, the coaching business has been intact since 2016 was when the business license was like officially filed, right? Do you
Mhm.
know how that is? Like
Yep,
the first year you file the business license is like you just trying to figure out what the heck coaching looks like and
for
figuring that
sure.
out. Yeah, I won my first pro card kind of within the first 2 or 3 years of coaching. So that happened pretty quickly. Obviously now like coaching at the pro level, there's a lot, man. It's hard for me. I don't really rank my accolades based off wins, and it's more like experiential, like how I'm changing people's lives type of a
Mhm.
thing. And especially like some of the pro card wins from last year for me, just like seeing people cry, like coming off stage for something they never thought would be achievable is like, and I can speak to one particular that comes to mind is like Kelsey Carlson, who hopefully she listens to this. She came to me, she'd gotten like third call outs at North Americans with a different coach, like 2 years prior. And she was like, I'm not even close to this standard. And then 2 years later, we went to Universe, won her class, won her pro card, and like she's an IFBB pro now. And she's like, I still don't feel like that weekend was real. It's
Mhm.
like being able to give people that kind of an experience is like something they'll remember for the rest of their life. So I'm very impact driven. The more impact I can create is where I thrive and where I do well. And that's kind of where the coaching businesses are headed, is kind of focused on that impact.
Well, I'm glad you said that because that's something that I've spoken about quite a bit in terms of, why I do what I do and why I've branched into the areas that I've branched in is because I'm always looking for that next opportunity to provide impact and to widen that breadth of impact. And, speaking as one of your former clients, like I had never done a bodybuilding show before. And I can tell you that for me, going through that process, and like I went through J3 University myself, like kind of as we started the coaching. So I kind of knew what to expect to a certain degree. And then, that whole experience being as, mentally transformative as it was, like I had no delusions of being an IFBB pro or even winning or placing well. I just wanted to be the most conditioned refrigerator on the stage. And you got me there. So it was, I can speak to whether it's winning your pro card or, just getting to the stage for the first time. There's a transformation that takes place if you do it properly. And it was 100% the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my whole life. And I don't think people get that experience because they're not present within it, I don't think.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is just, and I see this still as people coming in with maybe 1, 2, 3 shows under their belt, but the experience that they had with that previous prep like got them to 7, 8 weeks out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the standard of execution you have to hold a client to get them all the way there is extremely high.
Mm-hmm.
And most people aren't used to someone holding them to that standard to the level that I that I hold people to. Because at the end of the day, like, you're not only representing yourself, you're representing myself and my brand and my capacity as a coach. So I expect a lot of the people that I work with, but it's also why we win at the clip that we win at. It's also why we, produce athletes at the level that we produce athletes. Like, it's just kind of the standard we have to hold people to. But the reason I do it is because if you hold them to that standard on the forefront, the amount that they get out of it on the back end is massive, right? And I've also seen it ruin bodybuilding for a couple people. So there's like a double-edged sword to it, is like when they truly experience bodybuilding for the first time, it's like, oh wow, I did not sign up for this. Like, because their previous competing has been just like getting to 7 to 8 weeks out, and then they actually get all the way there for the first time and like, whoa, buddy, this is not comfortable. It's like, but they still glean something from that, right? So it's a double-edged sword, but in the reality of like changing people's lives for the better, I think truly diving into what you're doing is the only way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's where the whole brand kind of came from, right? Is like, no, all switch and pursuit of results was about being like a light switch, like be all the way on for something or just be off about it, right? And
Yep.
if you fully dive in, the what comes off the back of that is just progress in all areas of life.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, like, I remember there were a few occasions for me in the prep where I was like walking my dogs in the dog park after cardio, still fasted, trying to get more steps, and just literally crying because I was so, like, literally crying because I was so tired. And then remembering, I was like, this is actually what I signed up for, because this mental struggle is why I wanted to do bodybuilding, because I couldn't get that from powerlifting anymore.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that you're kind of diving into that, and I will say, like, you listened to me bitch and moan when I needed to bitch and moan, and then it was done, and then we kind of walked it forward. And that to me speaks to like, okay, if we're going to put that athlete first and we're going to put that mental approach and that growth and development first, that bleeds into the rest of the things that you do, because you have to approach everything else that you do in that regard. So let's speak a little bit towards the business. Obviously, it started with just you in 2016. Now you have 4 coaches that work under you.
We've got 2 publicly
Okay.
that work. We've got a couple on onboarding and the onboarding process. So
Okay.
that team is about to expand. That's kind of where like the next steps in the direction of the coaching is headed. Is we are in the process of combining a couple coaching brands and kind of branching out into creating a larger impact through that. So I'll be kind of taking a little bit more of a mentor role for these guys and girls.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the direction. So we'll have a team of 4, potentially 5 by January. So they'll be kind of fully onboarded, ready to roll January into December. And that'll be like the next step for me is helping them facilitate wins and coaching pros. And I'm really excited for it. So yeah, it's a huge step there. And for me, it's more, when I look at business, I look at like athlete development and then coach development. And I look at those 2 as like similar processes with different responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're still fostering someone into a place of autonomy. The only difference is the level of autonomy that individual has is different for a coach than it is for an athlete. And so you have to take, and that's why a lot of, to be honest, the coaches that are kind of coming through are going through the client process with us, whether it's myself or John. The majority of them have gone through it with me, but because they built that autonomy through the client process that now facilitates them being able to take on the autonomy that is required to be a coach under the brand, and just the level of coaching that we're going to require within that. So it's pretty cool. It's Jamie, in fact, just won another overall last weekend.
Oh, wow.
She's put a couple pros on stage this year, so it's pretty cool to see where she's at. She's been with me the longest, so
You love
She's
Canadians.
Yeah, man, I don't know what it is. Like I have like a whole roster of athletes that are Canadian. I've got two staff
Canadian
members that are
coaches. Yeah.
Canadian. Like I just think I need to get like temporary residency so I can just come live there half the year when it's not frigid.
Well, it's 2 degrees under zero today.
Yeah,
So
no,
already not even November, and we got some frost outside. So definitely not something that you're going to be used to. Um, Dude, I love to hear that. And it resonates really deeply with me in terms of, the dual role that has essentially, the same trajectory for the most part. There's these non-negotiable things that need to get done if you want to build your business. There's these non-negotiable things that need to get done if you want to build your physique. And I think having done that, you have competed in bodybuilding for an extended period of time. Maybe we'll talk about why that's been on the back burner, but actually I do want to talk about why that's on the back burner. But anyway, having gone through that, you can parallel think your way towards business. And I think a lot of people miss out on that. They're phenomenal athletes, but then just fall apart in the rest of their lives when they miss out on that opportunity to transfer that knowledge into a new realm, transfer that commitment into a new realm. And, we can talk about, being all in on one or the other, because actually, you know what? I'm going to pose the question to you. Do you need to be all in on business to have a successful business? And do you need to be all in on bodybuilding to have a successful bodybuilding career?
No, it's just priorities. It's how you allocate your time, right? And I mean, I'm literally one of my business partners is a pro bodybuilder who just almost won an open show for the first time he's ever stepped on stage in an open class. Like,
oh wow,
John is the epitome of high level bodybuilder, high level businessman. Like,
absolutely.
It's definitely feasible. It's also, what does your life look like kind of outside? Like, John's built his entire life around bodybuilding and running a business, right? Where for me, it's like I had until I had a kid, and then you have a kid, and it's like, oh, buddy, this is something different. So, yeah, so it's definitely feasible. I'm a believer in that. Unless you go through the process of doing it at the same time, you're probably not going to be as good as the coach off the back end, because the reality of coaching is that outside the top 3% of your roster, the majority of people are doing something similar, whether it's they're running their own business or they're got their own job or anything along those lines. You maybe got, let's say like a coach has 100 clients, right? That's not an uncommon client load for someone. You've maybe got 2 athletes on that roster, maybe 3 that are fully making their money off bodybuilding. That's it. If that, right? And that's if you're like a high level coach, right? And so you're just going to have to be able to facilitate the development of that athlete to be able to handle everything. And it's hard to do that if you haven't had to do it yourself.
Okay, so let's ask the question of, how do you navigate those conversations when there are hard and fast rules about things that need to get done? You need to be in that deficit. You need to have that, activity level high. You need to have training, nutrition, all that stuff dialed in. How do you navigate that conversation with someone who is trying to either, work a full-time job and be productive, or own their own business?
Yeah, so I think organizations probably and time management is the biggest thing that people miss out on. It's like the first thing I go to is how much screen time you have on your phone, right? Like, look at that little screen time thing. I had to do this for myself like 2 or 3 weeks ago, where it was like, man, I'm wasting a lot of time on that. So pointed in all directions, like myself included, but screen time, and then also like how much time are you wasting between tasks? So that's like block schedule type conversations where you're setting up like time blocks for specific tasks, and you follow those blocks and get those tasks done in those specific time blocks. And then when you learn how to handle that, it requires you being rigid about it at first, and then you can be a little bit more flexible with it if you learn
once you have the routine down.
Yeah. So those two things are probably the biggest things in teaching someone like, hey, there's time in the day to make this happen. You just got to make them priority and put them in your calendar and then execute them.
Well,
And so like, even to the granular of like mealtime from 9 to 9:20, 9:20 to 9:30 is your 10-minute walk. 9:30 to 12:30 is your client work block. 12:30 to 1 is social media content and like posting or replying to comments. 1 to 2 o'clock is, if it's a content production day, you're doing content production or whatever that looks like, right? Like every minute is planned. And so it's very OCD-ish, but it works. There's apps though that can do it for you. Like there's an AI, I think it's called Motion.
Yep.
That does it for you.
The beauty of the prep for me was that like I got 3 extra hours in my day because I wasn't sleeping.
Oh yeah, man, that wake up sleep, then with that cortisol,
so productive, bro.
Oh my God.
At first, like from like 4 to 7 a.m., I was like
clicking on all cylinders.
And then it just kind of
yeah, it's pretty funny. You see, like the sweet spot is like 6 to 10 weeks out. You see these people, they're like, if I coach a lot of coaches, right? So they'll like do new things in business and develop these things for their online coaching and all this crap. And then they get to like 3 weeks out and they're like, I cannot keep this pace up. What am I doing?
Well, it's so, like literally verbatim what happened to me. I remember reaching out to you 2 weeks out. I was like, listen, I got to go to Swiss. I can't keep digging anymore. We need to come out of this. And you're like, yeah, okay, no problem. Like you listened to me and it was like, okay. it got marginally better because I was just so deep in it. Yeah, it's I think any coach who listen, you gotta be a product of your product. So if you want to coach something, in my opinion, you have to have done it and done it at a moderately high level to be able to coach those at a high level. It's like, you know, how are you going to coach someone to squat 800 pounds if you've never pushed the limits of what you're able to squat? Or how are you going to be able to put a pro on stage if you've never competed, you know, if you've only competed once?
Yeah, I think there's an experiential aspect of it that you have to actually do it yourself. But I do think you can kind of look at the level at which you compete is not a requirement of coaching.
Right.
So some of the best coaches in the world have never stepped in a pro stage, right? And that's because they're very coach brained. There's a certain level of emotional intelligence that's required to be a coach to facilitate athlete development at that level.
Agreed.
And for those of you who don't know what emotional intelligence is, it's just basically the ability to shift the way that you communicate and handle someone according to someone's state and or personality and or life variables. And so that skill is just not typically a skill that a lot of great athletes have, because they're very like driven type A, and they're more like rigid in their understanding of what needs to happen. So they're executors, right? And if you can do, I don't remember what the thing is called, but it classifies people for businesses into 4 types of people. And there's like visionaries, which are like CEOs, there's executors, there's different ones, organization type people. And so there's a large difference in psychological profile of people who are really good coaches and people who are really good athletes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. For me, it's not so much the level at which you compete, because listen, not everyone can be a pro. Not everyone can squat 800 pounds. Not everyone can, right? So to me, it's about that pursuit of personal excellence. Like that to me is the key. If you're going about it and like going through the motions and you've done a show, it's like, okay, but did you put everything into it? Did you get on the back end, as we talked about before? Did you get the benefits on the back end of it to be able to increase your emotional intelligence when you're trying to communicate to those clients? So I'm glad you narrowed that down. So let's talk a little bit about the brand. So No Switch Fitness. And then there's also J3 University. To me, one of the things that I find a lot with the coaches that I mentor is they immediately try to take on this role of educator when they want to get clients.
Yeah.
But in my eyes, and what's worked for me, those are very 2 different things. Providing information for the purpose of education versus providing information for the purpose of client acquisition, 2 totally different things. Can you speak a little bit to, how you approach that? Because obviously it has to take both sides.
Yeah, I think the viewpoint in which you disseminate information is the difference. And I'll clarify that a bit.
Yep.
So as a coach trying to acquire clients, you're going to be largely in the what are we doing realm. So like the anecdotal expression of what you're doing from a nutrition standpoint or a training standpoint or whatever. In an educator role, there's frameworks that have to be built. And it's hard to explain this unless you've had to teach at a high level before. But the saying that I use for this is understanding something at a high level is like just straight up intellect, but being able to disseminate that information in something that's operational is how teachers operate. And so in order to be an educator, you have to take your intellect up to that level of full understanding, and then you have to be able to bring it back down into something that's a plug and play framework. So you should be able to take client A, client B, client C, plug them into this framework and find a solution for each person, no matter what their situation is, right? And so you'll see in like some of the presentations I give or even in J3 University, we have like mind maps built out that are operational frameworks for decision making for these. And so in order to be able to build that out, I mean, you've got to be able to see all the potential scenarios
Right.
that could potentially come across your desk within a coaching realm in order to do that, right? And we have different ones for different aspects. And so like not one framework is going to cover every single client, but you take a combination of all those frameworks that we build across the entire course, and then there's probably not someone that's going to show up to your desk. And so the difference from a teaching standpoint is I'm always teaching an aspect of framework to help someone understand that this is potentially a route that you would go down with this group of clientele, where as a coach for client acquisition, you're more showing that you're in the trenches doing this work and that kind of stuff. And that's a great place to be. Like, a lot of your ability to teach comes from the time that you spend in the trenches. But, and the reason I say that is because our whole goal is to combine anecdote or coaching experience with research, because
Agreed.
there's a large gap, right? And they have to cross. And there's places where you're going to lean more on one versus the other, like in PD realm. Like you're going to lean on the research that we have from an understanding of mechanisms of action and being able to apply that to the clientele. You're going to largely kind of lean on the research side of that application a little bit more. Whereas like training and nutrition, you're going to lean a little bit more on like the anecdotal side, just from like creating a client result is always done from the thing that they can adhere to and execute at the highest level. That looks different for every client. So knowing that and then building frameworks around that, that's the difference from an educator and a coach. And then that's just kind of how the content should change.
Yeah, the way that I've always conceptualized it is like, as an educator, you're concerned with the why. You're trying to let people know the why behind the decision. So, yes, we decreased calories. Why did we decrease calories? And that plays right into what you were saying with the framework. Then when you're trying to discuss things with a client, it's the how, right? Like, we're having this issue. This is how we solve it. They don't need to know why you made the decision that you made. And for the most part, unless they're a coach themselves, they probably don't care.
Yeah.
They just want to know, okay, does this make sense on the surface level? If yes, then I go forward. You trust in your coach that they know what they're doing and that they have your best interests at heart, which probably another conversation, but because I'm sure you get a lot of people that come to you with terrible horror stories about coaches. But for me, whenever I'm discussing content development with a coach, it always has to come down to like, you're a problem solver for that client, right? What problem are they running into? You're the person who can solve it. If you're speaking from an education framework, the language that you use is around the mechanisms of action of the solution and how it solved the problem.
Yeah, so it's different pain points, right? Like
Yep.
the pain points are a little bit different. And at the end of the day, like that's what business is you're finding a pain point and you're providing a solution to it, right? And so
Yep.
there's been a large shift in my content production because of where I'm at. Like I coach a ton of coaches, like a large percentage of my clientele are coaches themselves. And then obviously with the J3U stuff we're doing, like that's all coaching coaches, right? So everything that I do now is from that viewpoint. I'll put it out occasionally, but rarely am I in the coach to athlete conversation viewpoint, just because of where I'm at. And that conversation is more happening within the coaching realm. So it's huge. And that starts to get into brand and brand dialogue and creating that, right? And that's a whole podcast within and of itself, but it's a huge aspect of building out like the type of client that you want, and then classifying those clients into ideal versus villain versus vampire versus.
That's exactly what I was going to get into, because the fact that you coach a lot of coaches is not by accident, it's by design, right? So when you look at your goal of impact, which we started off our conversation with, the best way to make an impact is to make an impact on someone who impacts others. So now your impact is way more widely dispersed if you target that content towards the coach who wants to learn. They're obviously going to come to you to learn more, whether it be on an education side or to go through the process and pick your brain like I did on the client side. Then you get into a situation where you're probably acquiring more clients than you can handle, and then you start to expand your business.
Yeah.
So
like that was 22 for me. 22 was a very athlete end of 21 into the first half of 2022 was a very big athlete year for me. Like mid 22, I think I was running 160 clients or 150.
I think that's when I went down to visit, and we had
I was running like 150, 160 at that point, which I handled fine. I just worked 6 days a week. It wasn't too much of an issue, but that was the shift for me of like, okay, I've been doing this athlete thing since 2016. Like my role has changed drastically from where I'm at. I've got these people working under me. Like, let's build them out. And like, dude, Jamie is going to make well over 6 figures this year. Like that's huge. Like to have someone working for you that's doing that is like, is massive. So it's a shift, right? And it's actually like, I don't know how much I can say here, but it's so much of a shift that branding is going to change come January. And so like the actual like visuals of what everybody sees and all that is going to be completely different. And so I'm not really in a place to fully share that yet, but
yeah, I think
probably back end of November is kind of where that'll come out. Of like
that speaks to the impact, right? That speaks to like everything you're doing has started with impact and has led you to those decisions that you're making. So you're, no off switch in the pursuit of results.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no off switch in the pursuit of results. That extends into everything.
Yeah.
And if it's geared towards impact, now like you have this guiding light of impact and you dive full force into it, it makes the decision-making process along the way super simple for you because you know exactly what direction you need to be in. And I remember our conversation quite clearly when we were training together. You were saying how you were coaching a ton of athletes and you were wondering what that next step was going to be for you, because, this is something I think a lot of coaches need to think about is you can only exchange time for money for so long.
Yeah.
There are only 24 hours in the day and you should be sleeping for 8 of them. So yeah. Should, quote unquote should. So you can only handle so many clients. You can only handle so much work, especially when you factor in, work on the business and content generation and all the other things that need to move your business forward. You made a decision based on impact that further led your business towards, where you needed it to go. And it's led you to where you are today. So I think that's really the take home.
Yeah. And I look at it as like a glass ceiling, right? Like, where is that glass ceiling for you? And then where's that glass ceiling for others? And in order to be able to raise the glass ceiling for other people, you have to raise the glass ceiling for yourself. And so that's why I say 2023 was a transformative year for me, because I've raised that glass ceiling massively, just like the sky's the limit now. We've built the team out kind of around us to be extremely able to facilitate the growth that's going to come and just like the next steps in the business. People that can do things that I can't, and it's phenomenal. Like it's wild what can get done when you have the right people around you. And yeah, so it's if you would have told me 5 years ago that I would be having the kind of conversations from on the business type of meetings and conversations that I'm having right now, I would have laughed in your face. But it's just it's a product of the years that I spent in bodybuilding, honestly, like, and knowing that if you just keep your head down, like the places you can go is wild. It's unbelievable, man. And from a business development standpoint, like being able to help other people build their businesses to the point where they're paying for their family's bills and paying for their house, or being able to buy a house or things like that, that's extremely rewarding, more rewarding than any show will ever be.
Oh, and like I don't necessarily get to do that with people that work with me at Master Athletic. I mean, Liv would be the one who comes to mind, where she's built her business out to where it is now, and to think that she's only been doing this for 13 months and where she is now full time is pretty crazy. But working with mentorship clients and seeing the way that they've built their businesses to basically have the business of their dreams and only opportunities to grow, dude, that's impact.
Yeah,
you're changing your coaches' lives.
Yeah, and it's been cool, man. And there's been a lot of people that have positively impacted me across the way of just like, basically sat me down, like, look, like you're doing this at this level and you're missing out on 50% of what's capable of business development, right? Like you continue to improve this side and you're just like, the sky's the limit, right? And so having those kind of conversations have been massive for me, and well welcomed, because you can never be the smartest person in the room.
Okay, let's ask that question then. So at what points have these conversations happened? Have they been at peak points or have they been at low points?
I would say a little bit of both. I would say the one that was at a peak point that I thought at the time put me in a low point, but looking back actually opened me up to be able to do what I did across this year, was quitting bodybuilding. I was the biggest I'd ever been. I was like 260. I felt great. I felt great. Like 260 is not fun, but from a bodybuilding perspective, like I was like the biggest I'd ever been, right? And it was the Dubai trip that actually kind of led me to stopping competing, because Emily and I went through the IVF process. She was pregnant. We were about 2 months away from having Ellie. I went to Dubai, man, and they were phenomenal. They made all our meals for us. We had the full meal prep for the entire trip, and I lost like 12 pounds, and just being in Dubai and being active and trying to keep up with everything. And I had done that a couple of times with things that had come up for show weekends over the last 4 months, where I would like get up to 256, 257, 260, and then I would just lose 12 pounds, and then it would just be like this climb back up, right? And I was starting to realize that my role as a coach and a business owner was just overriding what I was capable of from a bodybuilding perspective, and that genetically I'm just not really built to be up there. And then it was a conversation with my wife that she's like, look, you've got a kid coming, like you've got responsibilities in regards to sticking around as long as possible for that kid, and you are going to be a great dad, and you're not going to want to do this when she's here. And, bodybuilder, you're like, yeah, whatever. Like, I'm just going to bodybuild and take care of my kid, right? Mm-hmm. But it was like probably 3 weeks before we had I'd made the decision to step away. And like in those first 3 months, I went from like 260 to like 230, like really quickly. I felt so much better. My operational capacity for check-ins and business development was tripled. Like I'm telling you right now, I work on check-ins 4 days a week, and I don't even work on check-ins 4 days a week that full day now. Where in the past, this amount of clients would have probably taken me 5.5 days. And so it's just opened me up to receive the things that I needed to receive from a business development standpoint, from like the business mentor side, to be able to take those next steps, because I was beating a dead horse with bodybuilding, if I'm honest.
Yeah. And I mean, like drawing a parallel, I'm kind of in that same situation. I'm definitely, we're not having kids for the next couple of years, but I'm looking forward to that and seeing like, what does my life architecture have to be like in order for me to be the dad that I want to be? And I
Different.
remember, I sent you an email about this, which kind of, triggered the podcast. Is like, it's something I very much respect about a man who steps up to the plate and says, being a father is the most important thing to me. How do I how do I show up for my family in the best way possible? And if you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to cram down 6 meals a day, run a business at the level that you do, a diversified business at that matter, where you have
Yeah.
multiple verticals, and try to be a father, you're going to fall short in one area.
Yeah.
And that's going to compromise your guiding light of impact.
Yeah.
So while that was probably a very challenging decision for you, I feel like in some ways it was easy.
Yeah, and I'll be straight up honest, man. Like the first 4 months after that were not the greatest for me from a emotional mental state. Like I probably not clinically diagnosed depression, but probably there and just not willing to admit it. Type of a thing, where it's only like now where I'm kind of looking back on that and seeing that that's potentially where I was, but that it was so necessary to be where I'm at now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's wild. I had a similar thing happen to me with golf, because like the meniscus injury took scholarships away. The first like 6 months after that, I just didn't know what to do with myself. Like I quit the sport. I didn't touch it for 10 years. And it was like, there's a lot of regret with how that was handled. And so like this time around, instead of like quitting, I just poured it into working and like being there for the new kid and stuff like that. And it's like you see the development as a mature adult and like the difference in which you handle situations. It's like I channeled that into more productive channels, where it's like, okay, like, yeah, that probably wasn't the greatest experience for 4 or 5 months of like mentally, emotionally where I was at, but it's put me in this position now where it's like, I'm so excited for the next 10 years, next 5 years. Like, man, what's to come is going to be so cool.
Well, it's an identity shift, man. I mean, like your identity was that of a bodybuilder, or let's, even first was as a golf athlete, and that identity was stripped from you and you kind of didn't know where you landed. Then you decided to step away from bodybuilding, and there was a piece of your identity, a large piece, that had to be stripped away to build something new. And the point that comes up to my mind is I did a podcast with Ed Cohn, and he told me that I was better known as a coach than an athlete. And I was like, well, man, that happened without my permission. but it's true. And I'm very grateful that I'm in this position where I can be present within this transition of identity. Like
Yeah.
there's no rush, there's no like impetus of a child, I don't have to give anything up per se, because I can still train the way I want to and all that kind of stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important to have these discussions so that people understand that the season of life that you're in and the identity that you attach to is going to change over time. And there
Mm-hmm.
are different vehicles that we attach our identity to, whether it be athletics or business or family. I think as we progress through life, it comes to a point where there's an integration of all of them towards the end, where it's just you as opposed to these individual things.
Yeah, I think I'm getting to the place where the integration of like everything that I want is there now. So like I'm doing things on the business front that I want to do. My business to life ratio is the best it's ever been in the last 6 years, 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I've got a kid who's beautiful, and I'm getting to do the things that I want to do kind of on the day to day. So it's been fun, right? Like, yeah, sure, maybe I don't train as much as I used to, or whatever, but yeah, it's been really different. And for someone that's very goal oriented and growth oriented and needs that task type of thing every day, It's been a shift, especially scheduling with a baby. Like when you have your first kid, you'll learn this whole schedule thing for the first 6 months out the window.
Yeah.
But it's been wild. And to be honest, like from an objective viewpoint, the amount of development that I've made across this last year of being able to facilitate growth, not only for myself, but for other people, and be able to identify weaknesses, build out solutions and frameworks to address those weaknesses for people, and then get them to that next level, has happened more in this last year to year and a half than it did in the first 6 years of business. And the experiences that I had in those first 6 years have diversified me to the point that there's pretty much not a situation, business or client, that I feel like I can't help. So yeah, it's crazy when you think about it, but it's fun, that's for sure.
The point I want to emphasize to a lot of people is that it took you 6 years to get here, and that's probably closer to 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So you're not an overnight success. That's not
No, I mean, I've been in the bodybuilding world for over 10 years. So like I just didn't start a business the moment I stepped into bodybuilding, right? So I've been in this thing for, let's see, I'm 28 now. So I was 17 when I started. So 11 years.
Yeah. I mean, I took my first client when I was 18 years old. I'll be 36 in 2 days. So it's like, I literally half my life.
Yeah.
Half my life has been spent coaching. And, while my business is still growing, I don't think it'll ever be where I actually want it to be, because what I want it to be will continue to change. Seeing that growth and development in myself, seeing the growth and development in others, like that identity shift is made a lot easier when you're fulfilled in the areas of your life. The big question I have for you, and I know that you're going to laugh, how do you get that catharsis from business that you get from a fucking heavy set of something?
I don't.
That's the one thing I'm like, fuck. If I'm addicted to anything, it's that.
Yeah, I think it's I don't get it. It's never going to be that for me. I enjoy growth and building that path and just executing that development process. I'm very process oriented. But yeah, I'll never get that same. And I think I've had to learn to let it go, man. Okay. Been the hard part for me is, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm like 225 now. The reality of me trying to sit under a 7.25 pendulum set at 225 versus 260 is just not happening. And so like it wouldn't, I wouldn't even stand back up with it, I don't think. I mean, maybe for a rep or two, but like it's just not happening, right? And so when the identity shift it's funny you bring that up. I knew that was coming. Like having gone through it before with golf, like I was well prepared for that shift to happen. And even though it still put me in a place that probably wasn't the greatest, I learned to let go of that really quickly because I knew it wasn't feasible to be able to maintain what I was doing from a performance standpoint. And so for me, I kind of, being a process-oriented individual, I just put that into the processes of things I'm invested in. And so like the process of development as a coach myself, like even though I'm mentoring other coaches, like my journey of developing as a coach will never end. Like,
I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
I'm never going to be the person that says like I'm a know-it-all. Like there's other people that are better at other aspects of coaching potentially than me. And if I can learn or glean something from them, that's great. And that's kind of how I view it. So like the process of development as a business owner, the process of development as a coach, the process of development and some of my personal endeavors that I now have, like it's that's where I put all that. Because yeah, no, there's nothing that replaces like loud rap or rock music, standing under a squat bar and getting that. And so you just have to channel it in different ways. And I have my moments where I'm like, like, man, there's nothing better than I wish I could just load up a bar. It's just like loading up a bar now looks like a lot different than what loading up a bar looked like then. And being that it's like at 5 a.m. because that's when I train now. It's just not my favorite time of day. I know I'm such a grandpa now, dude. Like I'm training at 5 a.m. I'll be honest, and maybe, and I kind of want to share this because we see a highlight reel from Instagram, of like what business actually looks like.
Yeah.
So in the last month and a half, 2 months, in the last 2 months, I've slept in my bed maybe once a week because I'm staying up to work and I refuse to wake my wife up, who is sleeping and trying to get good rest so that she can be present and there for our daughter. And like the reality is, man, it's like in order to do this well right now, just because of the development of the new business and things that I'm doing, I have to be present. I have to be there when my daughter's awake and or when my wife's awake. And so that time frame from like 5:30 p.m. to, let's say 5 p.m. to probably 8:30, 9 o'clock is like for them, right? And so it, at a time where that probably potentially used to be like 5 to 7:30, I could work if I wanted to. Just it's not something that's manageable for me now. And so like most nights I am up till midnight working, and most nights or most mornings I'm up at between 5 and 6 right now.
Yeah. Like
And
same breath. The way our schedule works, obviously we don't have children. I usually work until about 8:30. From 8:30 to 10 o'clock is Liv and I's time together. We usually just watch a show, in bed by 10 o'clock. I cannot remember the last time that we woke up at the same time. I'm always out of bed at least an hour to 2 hours before she is.
yeah, and so like it's a season of life, and you're gonna have seasons where that happened, right? Like 2020 was the last time, 2020 into 2021 was the last time I had a season like this, where it was like I was doing mentor calls from people in other countries. So I was staying up till 1 to do these calls, and like it's gonna happen. And then you're gonna reroute back to your normal routine and you're gonna be fine, right? And so success doesn't come from the perfect morning routine or this perfect bedtime or whatever. I mean, it does in bodybuilding, but that's just because it's an athlete endeavor. But like in kind of what we're doing in development, like right now, my priorities are family and where my coaching is going and where all of my other coaches' coaching is going. And so if that means I stay up till midnight, 1 o'clock, majority of the week, then that's what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, I want to be mindful of your time, but I do have a couple of quick hit questions before we sign off. The first one being, what's the scariest set you've ever done in your whole life?
Anxiety going into it was probably the 6-plate RDL. Just like, that's just like, you're just looking at the bar, you're like, I don't know how this is going to get up on the floor, but we're going to do it anyways. And you're in that environment. We were in the UK. I was at FLF.
Yeah.
Oscar was in the room, and Ross and Cal, and like it was so much fun. So that's like awesome. You're gonna do it.
You're gonna do it. Yeah.
The other one was a 7 1/4 pendulum, because I had pinged my knee on that pendulum a few months before, like 6, 7 months before. And like I never touched that weight before. And this is the Atlantis pendulum for those wondering. And I unracked it and I was like, oh my God, what is this? And then 3 reps in, I blacked out for a second. And then I had to like regather myself and then do a couple more. And so like that was probably the scariest set that I've ever been in. Granted, it's a machine. So, you guys can make fun of me if you want, but
no. There's some scary machine. Listen, there's some scary machine squats if you do them properly. I think the scariest one I've ever done, I'd squatted 750 for a double by myself in the basement during COVID.
Oh no, that's see, I don't move under a bar well. Like a regular barbell squat looks a little bit closer to a hinge than a squat for me. So
well, me too. That's why when we started together, I stopped squatting.
That's not something I participate in frequently, but yeah, like squatting is one of the closest life or death experiences you'll ever have if you do it right.
The next question is, do you crack your egg on the side of the pan or on a flat surface?
On the counter.
Good man. Top 5, dead or alive, you and 5 dinner guests.
Ooh. That's tough. Dead or alive. Tiger Woods is one of them.
Okay.
I think people see that from like an athlete perspective. I would want the mentality perspective from someone like him.
Mm-hmm.
For people who don't know, he's got like a Buddhist background, and so like the meditative state in which he can get into, like that can serve you in any endeavor. So that would be kind of why I would have him there. From a business development standpoint, Alex Hormozy.
Mm-hmm.
Would just love to pick his brain for a bit. 5 people, Jesus, that's going to be tough.
It's a big dinner.
Big dinner table. That's a lot of conversations. From a probably just want to like meet this person type of a thing would be Michael Jordan. Again, probably a little bit more mentality based.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very like I love mentality type stuff and like what that takes and at a high level. Just to say that I've met him and shared a dinner with him would probably be where that is. And MJ loves golf too, so that would be really cool. From a bodybuilding perspective, probably Ronnie Coleman, to sit down and have dinner with him and just really ask him if it was worth it. Like, was what he did worth it for where he's at now? And just like understand like what that looked like to do that at that peak level for that long. Like, people make fun of him, right? Because he was a little bit genetically gifted to the point that he didn't have to think of it at the level that a lot of us do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But man, success leaves clues. He did a lot of things right. And like, you can't ignore that. And so like, that would probably be, so that gets me to 4, right? That's Tiger, Ronnie. Fifth. Honestly, I think for me, I'm at a point in my life where the 5th person at the dinner table would be my wife, just to have her experience that with me.
I knew you'd say
I'm at a place where if I'm going to do something that's fun or memorable or something like that, I want to share that with her.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she'd probably be the 5th person.
She's gonna be mad you picked her last.
No, she's not. No, she's not. She's gonna be happy that I took the mental leap to think that I would rather share that with her than be selfish about that experience.
All right, the last question. If you could see anyone on this podcast with the caveat that you have to help me get them on, who would it be?
Oh man. I think I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say John Jewett, and y'all are gonna rag me for that. It's like my best friend, but I think people underestimate the amount of understanding from a business side that he has.
If they do, they're stupid.
Sure, we're known as educators, right? And we can do the bodybuilding thing all day. We can talk whatever you want in regards to bodybuilding, physiology, whatever, right? The dude from a business perspective, and I will say this could be one or the other. A lot of this is largely due to Mark Fox. Like, Mark is, I have never seen someone in my life work so hard. And Mark might be the person to have if he'll come on, but I think John's more likely. But the amount of conversation that the 3 of us have in regards to like, where do we take our vision, and like the amount that actually gets executed on because of that group, like either one of them would be phenomenal. Because there's a lot of background that people don't see that goes on in order for us to do what we do. And a lot of that is because one of the 3 of us is handling something.
Yep.
Right. And I'll be honest, like, I dream of operating at the level that Mark operates on. It's ridiculous, dude. Like, Mark is the backbone of what we do. And it's like, me and John do a ton, but man, it doesn't happen without Mark and that group of 3. So it's cool.
Okay. Well, you expect a text message from me.
Yeah, you will. I've got a call with John today. I'll ask him if he can come on.
Beauty. Luke, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know it's not the usual podcast that you're used to filming, but I think your experience is one that will resonate with a lot of people, especially those that want to get to where you are. and I'm very excited to see where you continue to go.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's been a long journey, and I'm only 28, so we
Exactly.
got a long way to go.
Exactly. Everyone, thank you so much for joining to this conversation. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. We'll catch you on the next one.